Hello and welcome to External Affairs. Today we are discussing Norwegian foreign policy.
With Alex spelt with a KS, not an X, and your surname. How do you pronounce your full surname?
Nersveen.
Nersveen. I thought it was Nersveen. Okay, very interesting. Well, we're back here talking about Norwegian Norwegian foreign policy. I think the third entry of assuming that our students on campus simply because they're from that country, they will know about that country. They'll be an expert in that country's foreign policy. But I trust you know a fair amount.
We've been right so far, haven't we?
We've been right so far. We've spent quite a bit of time with them, I think,
exactly.
like outside of this. Yeah, we've learned quite a bit. But we're going to start off with some opening questions from our fifth host, James Coe.
Right, so just starting off, what is Norway's current foreign policy doctrine? And is there any part of it you'd like to see changed?
So I describe the current Norwegian foreign policy doctrine as quite mixed, as in we're a part of an alliance in the EU with NATO, and security-wise we're quite leaning quite towards the West and trying to follow the Western policies such as by the US and the UK. However, we also have a more neutral position when it comes to other conflicts. For example, with Russia-Ukraine, Norway has picked the side of Ukraine. However, with Israel-Palestine, for example, Norway has picked a more neutral stance, and that's more widely the trend with Norwegian policy trying to be a mediator between every state and try to talk to everyone and believes that diplomacy is the best way to go, as a military invention hasn't really worked. So Norway tries to be like diplomatic with everyone that wants to be diplomatic with them. So I'd say that's broadly quite the Norwegian form.
Interesting. So I guess on that topic, could you speak a bit more to their sort of role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict that you brought up?
Yes, for example, with Russia-Ukraine is a bit peculiar because Norway had a reasonably close relationship with Russia before the war. However, this has been quite severed. Yes, Norway is quite a firm believer in international law and the right of every country to be like self-determinating. So Norway had a quite strong reaction against Russia and severed pretty much every diplomatic tie with Russia after they decided to invade Ukraine, in 2022, and has imposed quite heavy sanctions on Russia, and is trying in a way to support Ukraine. However, it hasn't, compared to the rest of other conflicts, it hasn't really taken a position of trying to mediate between the parties, which is a bit peculiar, I'd say.
Do you think they would have taken sort of that same anti-Russian stance if, for example, if it had been a different conflict with the same implications, but didn't have a country bordering them?
I think so, because it was quite clear that Russia was the one that invaded Ukraine, and that's quite different from other conflicts. But I'd say like this stance against Russia is even more heavy because Norway is a bordering country, and there has been a lot of tensions, especially in the Arctic with the Russian border there. There's been a lot of tensions that has only increased recently, and I think that when Russia is aggressive on the international stage, Norway has to take a stance to defend itself. So I think it's using the situation in Ukraine as a way to just stand up to Russia, trying to defend its own interests.
Also, sort of more on that point of sort of looking at Russia-Ukraine, looking at Israel-Palestine, I'm curious why you think Norway's taken different approaches to that. Is it sort of what's in its own interest, sort of their own sort of set of moral principles, different conflicts entirely that they have to respond to, possibly NATO's role, international pressure? I'm sort of wondering if you could identify any sort of key factors that sort of helped shape their foreign policy approach to the two different situations.
Yeah, I'd say Norway just works to maintain the international order and just try to solve everything diplomatic, and therefore takes a stance of trying to mediate and such. However, as I said, with Russia-Ukraine, they haven't really done that, but with Israel-Palestine, they have, for example, taken steps, in the Norwegian parliament recently announced that they would recognize Palestine if it contributed to a peace settlement, and they were also previously quite keen in the Israel-Palestine conflict with the Oslo Accords, which were an attempt to try and solve the conflict. However, that didn't work out. But Norway just tries to make sure that the world is peaceful and that everything is done multilaterally, as Norway is not a huge country population-wise, and somehow we've managed to have quite a large diplomatic presence in the world and just try to maintain that to kind of stay relevant on the international stage.
And so that sort of approach to sort of being sort of an international mediator, sort of stabilizer, not entirely unlike Canada. Would you agree with that approach to foreign policy? Do you think it's served Norway's interests in sort of the amount of time it's been practicing it, or do you think there's maybe sort of more, Norway-centric approaches that could be taken, or sort of maybe more aggressive foreign policy, or should it stay on track with what it's doing?
I think the current track is good because despite Norway's presence on the international stage, it's quite a small country with only 5.5 million people. It doesn't really compare to a country such as Canada. However, we have managed to, through our diplomatic efforts, have managed to gain a bigger role compared to countries with a similar size to us internationally. So I feel like having an aggressive approach would just alienate other nations and just ruin everything that Norway's tried to build up since the 40s by trying to just talk to everyone and try to be a diplomatic country.
And on that note, Alex, I mean, how far can you really align Norway to the West? Because it seems to be does it have a non-aligned foreign policy on some issues, or I'm not sure. Yeah,
I'd say Norway's ideologically quite aligned with the West and usually follows alongside the West. However, with, for example, Israel-Palestine, Norway has taken a more European stance compared to a more Western stance. But more broadly, I'd say Norway follows or are part of the Western approach, Western ways of dealing with conflicts. However, Norway tries to be more independent than the West, but despite actually following what the West does.
Like, what are its relations with the United States?
Relations with the US are quite well, and Norway has made several attempts to try and bolster them, as the US is our biggest security guarantor, and there is a large Norwegian diaspora in the US as well, so it's quite a large part of trying to establish relations with the US and just try to maintain them.
Okay, very good. And then, so kind of to sum up the questions James has asked you, where do you see Norway's place in the world in the coming decades?
I see it as maintaining what it has now, trying to, as I said, mediate and also try to bring forward positive climate change and try to lead the change away from carbon-based fuels. However, how successful that will be.
I can't wait to scrutinize you about climate change. The climate warrior I am. Yeah. That's a joke. Yeah. Okay. Well, so we've spoken about. Have we touched on NATO yet?
No.
Well, I believe Norway is a founding founder of NATO.
Yeah. So Norway used to have a non-aligned policy. However, we changed that right after World War II, as we realized that didn't work. So Norway took the step to become a founding member of NATO, and has been NATO has been quite important for Norwegian policy, as we believe that is the reason Norway is able to maintain its independence, as we are not easily influenced by states that we don't want to influence.
Right. I'm interested about Norway's role in World War II.
Yeah.
I think Finn might have a question on this regarding the occupation.
So, I mean, do you think the reason until this year Sweden wasn't a member of NATO? Partly due to Soviet influence and such, but do you think part of the reason Norway was and Sweden wasn't is because Norway was occupied directly by the Nazis for the duration of the Second World War, and Sweden maintained a semi-neutral stance, trading with both sides? Yeah,
I'd say that the occupation was a large reason for Norway deciding to remove its non-aligned status, as the policy from Norway was to have a kind of passive neutrality, as before the invasion by Nazi Germany there was quite a large presence of UK mining as well, so both sides were kind of impeding on Norwegian neutrality, and Norway just decided to actually pick a side to try and stop another invasion from happening in the future.
When it picked the side that didn't occupy it for 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So if we talk about, just to quote the Norwegian Foreign Ministry, they say on this website that the security challenges facing the world are becoming increasingly complex. NATO will meet these challenges through a strong commitment to NATO, its broad engagement in peace and reconciliation efforts, and through international cooperation. So it seems what you've said, that an overview you've given, that they're largely adhering to that, and that this seems to be kind of a common kind of statement. And on that note, are there any parallels you can draw with NATO to other countries? I mean, I know, James, you spoke about Canada. This is actually quite beautiful, having a Canadian talk to a Norwegian student with what seems like a fairly similar approach to foreign policy when we interview you, James. Would you agree that there are any parallels to other countries?
Yeah, Norway's, internationally at least, is often compared with Denmark, Finland, Netherlands and Canada, and Sweden as the like-minded countries trying to encourage international diplomacy and maintaining and strengthening the international order. So I say that's a fair comparison, because Norway broadly has the same
Yeah.
aims as Canada of trying to just maintain a peaceful world.
And in terms of, before we delve into these other topics, then, in terms of the world order, I believe when we spoke about US foreign policy, we were asked a question by Brendan, who we interviewed last week, about whether we would prefer kind of a more rules-based international order that kind of maintains the power of the West, well, in return for stability, or a more multipolar one, continue this shift to multipolarity, bringing greater voices to smaller states, but at the sacrifice of instability, of a degree of instability. What is Norway's position on that? Do they want to see states in the periphery more empowered?
I think there's a mixed feeling, because Norway would like to see more countries on the international stage. However, Norway also believes that democratic countries should be the ones that are actually being able to control, because Norway is quite against authoritarian regimes and them in gaining more influence. So I think that Norway wants to maintain the international order led by the West, but also welcomes other voices being heard. However, Norway believes that democracy and human rights should be the main pillars of actually maintaining the international order, and therefore they should be the deciding factors of who actually has power.
Sort of a soft Western, softly pro-Western stance.
Yeah,
I
I'd say
guess
so.
then. Yeah, that's quite interesting then.
Okay, yeah. I mean, and you spoke about human rights and democracy. Norway also seems to be a strong proponent of human rights.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that, and like how does it actually promote or protect human rights around the world in practice?
So Norway are quite involved through UN organizations with providing relief, like the emergency relief aid, and I believe the goal of the Norwegian government is to have around 1% of the GDP of going to aid. Might be wrong with that number, but it's quite a significant amount. So, and also we are contributing on like trying to create to establish democracies and make them lasting. But
That
it's
makes
more
sense,
of I'd say much more like trying to aid in creating democracy and actually trying to impose it, as we believe in like self-determination.
Right, self-determination. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and so I think there's also this is a link to kind of humanitarianism and also promoting international peace, mediating conflicts. What has Norway done on that part historically, with peacekeeping operations through NATO, for example?
Norway has contributed in many of the UN peacekeeping operation with small numbers, but they have contributed and also contributed in the negotiations of it. And Norway did also contribute with NATO in the early 2000s. But Norway has contributed to peacekeepers, not as much recently, but they have contributed with.
You mentioned negotiations as well.
Yeah.
Do you know much about Norway's counter-terrorism policy and its approach to negotiating with terrorists?
So
not so much. Yeah.
Norway is one of the few Western countries, for example, to have negotiate with the Houthis as they,
Oh wow.
yeah, which came out recently that Norway has had secret negotiations with the Houthis in Oman, I believe, and
That's big news.
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
so Norway is trying to also previously Norway also had hosted Taliban officials to have meetings in Oslo.
That's diplomacy.
Yeah. So
when
it's-
when though, was that after 2001 or before? Because the US also hosted some, but it was.
I think it was around 2000. It was before. It's after 2001. It's more recently, last
Yeah,
couple of
yeah.
years, but before
Okay.
the Taliban takeover. But yeah,
Wow.
they have it when it looks like that someone is, or like a party is in control of large areas. Norway are willing to negotiate with them to try to create a peaceful settlement instead of just prolonging the conflicts that are going on.
Even if they're sort of, even if the Norwegian government recognizes them as terrorists.
Yeah, as we
That's-
believe that
Yeah,
making peace with them would be better than just keeping the conflict going.
that's quite a break from the classic NATO stance, though.
Yeah,
know.
that's one of the ways Norway's like making its own path from
Mm.
NATO, despite being a member of NATO.
That is quite interesting.
And sort of engaging in this sort of dialogue with the Houthi, do you think that'll have any sort of impact between Norway and maybe the close relationship of some of its neighbors and sort of close allies? So, for example, the UK, the United States, not too long ago, they sort of led, and I'm not 100% sure, but it might still be ongoing, led strikes against Houthi targets. How do you think that sort of impacts the relationship with Norway and the UK?
I don't think it really would, because it's kind of a known stance that Norway are willing to negotiate with people as. With the Houthis, it's a bit difficult because they have recently quite changed their stance towards the West. But I'd say it's kind of as usual for Norway, just trying to negotiate, try to create peace, and it doesn't really sever relations with Western countries that have different interests in there. Because, for example, the UK are way more involved militarily than Norway is. So.
Right. Interesting. And I guess sort of military aside, what do you think sort of the relationship Norway has with its close neighbors? So we've talked about sort of, the States, Russia, these big players, but how does Norway sort of interact with, Sweden, Finland, I guess the UK just to the south, sort of?
Iceland, even.
Exactly, yeah. So in
Yeah.
terms of, economics, really any big sort of positive or negatives that you want to
Yeah.
talk about?
Yeah, for example, we can start with Iceland with the EFTA, the European Free Trade Agreement, with Norway, Iceland, and two other countries as well, with trying to just maintain good relations and
It was a
have free trade.
UK policy originally, wasn't it, in the 50s and 60s?
Yeah, but then the UK
Then-
joined the EU, and then
Yeah, it was
Yes.
sort of the less successful.
yeah. And when it comes to Sweden and Finland, we have really good relations. We are neighboring countries that have good relations and have a lot of trade with each other, and also are members of the Arctic Council, trying to
You have a very long border with each other.
yeah,
Yeah.
Norway and Sweden, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And also what this is a bit of a random question. I'll probably take a break after this, but do you know much about Norway's fish industry, and is that quite important, like geopolitically, with trade and that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Norway has quite a large fishing industry, both like fish farms and also fishing in the ocean. And has historically been quite a big industry in Norway, especially in the west. And Norway continues to export large amounts of seafood
Yeah.
across the world, and has used that somewhat diplomatically. For example,
Okay.
with China, as the big part of the Norwegian relations with China now are the fish exports that are going to China as this.
To China.
Yeah, to China. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought China already have enough fish, but anyways, I suppose we'll take a break there.
Yeah, we'll take a quick break right now. So we'll see in about 5 minutes. Welcome back to External Affairs.
So we want to know more about the United Nations.
Mhm.
It seems. What about on some other issues? So, how has Norway voted in the UN Security Council? How does it contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, just beyond climate change, and gender equality and development more broadly, and other kind of issue-based regimes within the UN?
Yeah, so with
Mhm.
Security Council, we try to, the Norwegian government has had a policy of trying to be a member every 20 years.
Yeah, like it was they're trying to be member recently.
Yeah, they
You
were a
see
member
that,
of a
yeah.
couple of years ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
brilliant. Okay. Yeah.
and yeah, just try to promote peace and because in terms of human rights, trying to promote human rights, just trying to work towards the sustainability goals and try and help other countries in trying to achieve so diplomatically. So Norway is quite a big proponent of trying to make sure that the sustainability goals are reached and tries to help other
Yeah.
countries reaching them as well.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Does it have any kind of particular delegations to, like, special regimes within UN or other global governance institutions like the IMF or the World Bank? I guess I could even ask, what is Norway's place in the global political economy? That seems like quite a similar question to earlier. I'm not too sure.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Good
Norway
question.
has some representation there. How we try, I wouldn't say it's that special. We
Okay.
try to maintain like how it is and
Yeah.
try to contribute.
Has Norway ever needed a bailout from the IMF?
No, I don't think so. I think
I
Norway's.
would have heard of that one.
Yeah, I think
Or
Norway's
large-
economy has been quite stable.
Yeah.
A large infrastructure project that's
Uh,
being funded.
no, I don't think so. I don't think.
Presumably it funds its own ones.
Yeah,
What about foreign
Norway's.
direct investment into the country?
No, I wouldn't say so. There's been some smaller ones, but not really any major one. Norway's
Okay.
usually quite self-funding.
We need to send Liz Truss over there to shake things up.
If you didn't hear that, Drew said, "I think we need to send Liz Truss over there to shake things up." What are
yeah,
what are your
how
views
how
on
d-
that
how do
statement?
Norwegians feel about libertarian economics?
Well, at the time, Norway had the Labour government, so I think we're not really in favour of it. But we are a country that doesn't want to meddle in other countries' domestic politics, so we just
Yeah.
kind of react to what happened and try to just
Yeah.
stay as it is.
Yeah. Okay. Should we just turn back before we start asking you some sort of less serious questions we've prepared? We have a very good question here from Michelle. And this is kind of about, this is about kind of the societal sort of question. Is about, does the lack of racial diversity in Norway, does that influence its internal stability compared to the multi-diverse societies like the UK and the US?
I wouldn't say so. Even
Yeah.
though Norway has like a quite large majority of Norwegians, we do have
Yeah,
ethnic minorities,
Yeah.
and there have been some tensions there. However, I feel like
Mhm.
there hasn't been
but
really.
considerably lower to the UK or the US. Or
Yeah,
France, especially
think-
the US, I guess.
Yeah, we do
Mm.
have some indigenous populations that we have had other
Yeah.
minorities coming in, but there haven't been any major issues.
Yeah.
I'd say
And-
they're quite well integrated.
Do you think that influences, or just how do you think Norway is perceived by countries in the global south?
Well, Norway is
Yeah.
perceived as quite a good country and like try to encourage peace as and we also have quite large aid contributions.
Yeah.
So I'd
Oh,
say
yeah,
Norway is
so
quite
they're-
positively
yeah.
viewed upon as a Western
Mhm.
country hasn't really been trying to meddling with.
Because there
But-
seems to be plenty of kind of anti-American sentiment and anti-French sentiment in West Africa, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so what do you know? I mean, I assume you haven't picked apart the Norwegian international development sort of financial documents that much. But do you know to what extent, like, how much of that aid is loans? How much of it is sort of material? How much is tied to sort of help? How much, like, how do I phrase this? How much actually helps people, and how much is sort of, high interest loans and tied aid that ends up harming developed countries more than it really aids?
From my understanding, we don't do loans. We just do like trying to assist the governments. Like we just, from my understanding, we just give money in a way or just give
Yeah.
supplies. So we unlike other countries, we don't really have a policy of doing loans, but we just because we believe that isn't effective. But so we just like try and give financial contributions to governments in need and try and invest in stuff that isn't trying to make us a profit, just try to help the local country.
That's pretty good. It's golden.
Does anyone have any final questions regarding Norway's role in foreign policy? I think this was a good unpacking. I mean, this is really
Yeah.
our goal with these foreign policy analysis episodes, is really just to unpack and give an overview. I think you've provided just that. So we'll move on to the usual. I believe you're applying for a master's. at the University of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I'm applying for, like, one of the masters I'm applying for is a master at University of Edinburgh for international and European politics,
Mm-hmm.
and also applying for some other masters as well. But
One of the courses in climate change.
yeah, that's one of my
And
backup options.
sustainability.
Yeah, it's
Your
one of my backup options.
Why
but,
not your first option?
because I'm not that interested in environmental policy.
Okay, no, EU sounds very interesting. I'm sure it is. But why not Exeter?
I feel like 3 years is enough, and I would like to see somewhere
Yeah.
new as well.
No,
I like
that's fair
Yeah,
enough.
you're both quite new here, so you haven't really gone
Yeah.
for the slugger here.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, you're also an international relations student, like us, like me and Finn. How have you found the last 3 years of study, and how have you found kind of adjusting living as a student in a foreign country?
I find it quite interesting the transitions from like living at home to just being alone abroad was not as big as I thought, but I've enjoyed it. I've thoroughly enjoyed studying international relations.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant degree, yeah.
Yeah, take it. All
Take
all
it.
all listeners, please take IR.
Yeah.
There aren't enough of us.
Vote Finn and Drew for co-social sec. Am I allowed to promote electoral?
I don't know.
That's breaking. I don't think you have to promote everybody else now.
Okay, I promote everyone else, and if you're listening to this, I encourage you to get RSOC membership and nominate yourself for a position.
No,
Yes.
too far.
Anyway, should we ask about the trolls?
There's quite an important question I prepared. Yeah, so let me just. I think I should read it out. What are your opinions of Norwegian trolls? With special reference to the recent 2022 Netflix movie, are they an accurate depiction of Norwegian society and its peoples, or an unfair and untrue stereotype?
Well, when it comes to trolls, they are a like folklore part of Norway, and we are quite proud of it, as it's quite popular in like tourist shops to buy trolls. When it comes to the troll movie, I think
Live trolls.
no, more like statues.
Okay, Norway has good
Okay.
regulations surrounding that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but when it comes to the movie, I'm not too sure. I know it was really popular, but I haven't actually seen it, even though it's in Norwegian and it was really popular globally. But yeah,
That's pretty funny, yeah. And you had a question about
Yes,
Occupy. Yeah.
my favourite Norwegian
Yeah.
TV show, Occupied, where Norway is basically invaded by a Russian EU coalition because it decides to stop.
Russian
producing
EU
oil.
coalition.
It's very complicated. We don't have time to explain the whole plot now. How plausible do you think the show is?
in terms of the Russia part, I think it's less likely now.
Hmm.
However, if Norway did decide to do as in the show, or just drastically just stop producing oil and gas, I think it would want some EU countries to intervene, since they're quite reliant on Norway. But I think
Yeah.
it's quite unlikely of actually happening, because I think Norway cares enough about its allies to not do it.
If it did, do you think sanctions would follow, or do you think that would they'd just sort of be like fine because of the sort of alliance and the strong
Yeah,
relations?
Norway should be able to do what it wants. If it wants to withdraw oil,
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying it shouldn't. I'm saying
yeah.
that's not how the world works.
So,
know.
Are you saying other countries?
I'm saying
put
would-
sanctions
would-
on
do you
Norway
think
for
other
not giving
countries-
their oil to other countries?
Do you think other countries would begin sanctions or embargoes on fish, for example, if Norway sort of just stopped producing oil and gas?
That's completely unfair if they did that. Yeah.
I don't think, maybe some European countries would be quite annoyed, but I don't think they would actually do sanctions, and they
Yeah.
would just try to
Yeah.
find other sources.
That would be equivalent to encouraging bad behavior. It's like sending a student to detention for being a very good and responsible student. Okay, I'll stop that
It's
analogy.
not, that
That
analogy
fell
just
flat, yeah.
it's the
But if Norway ever gives up oil, then praise on them for managing the transition. I think
yeah, but I think that the point in the show is that it's not exactly a transition. It's
Yeah.
pretty much overnight is how it's done. Anyway, that's
Okay.
Occupied. Good TV
Interesting.
show. Go watch it.
Yeah, and you also just returning back to your future interests. What about after your masters? What are your career prospects?
Well, what I would like to do, if everything goes to plan, is to work in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That would be my goal, but I don't have any concrete plans yet. But I would like to
Mhm.
work something internationally. Or
I mean, I can't
Mhm.
imagine considering the population of Norway, there are that many international relations students, and you study at a Ross Group University in the UK, you would have quite a good chance of being recruited. Perhaps.
Maybe, I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
I like that. Humble, modest.
Yeah.
What
That's a good thing. Yeah.
what kind of, I guess then, almost cycling back to foreign policy, what, there are certain postings, for example, in the UK Foreign Office that are sort of seen as, like the big ones, the strong allies, the US, France, Germany, maybe, Australia. What are sort of Norway's equivalents of like the big, or the desired, I guess, postings within the Foreign Affairs Ministry?
I'd say the ones in Washington, the ones in New York with the UN.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Do you have an embassy in South Africa? And do you have a South African embassy?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
Presumably, I think we probably would have heard if there weren't any diplomatic relations between.
Yeah, Norway does have diplomatic relations with every country, but we don't have embassies in every country. But we, we do have an embassy in Pretoria.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, that's summer travel plan sorted. And if there are any other backup ideas, like what about working in a think tank? Because Norway also actually has, there's actually something I wanted to raise earlier, quite a big number of think tanks. There's one especially, I think it was called Priro or something.
Peace
Priro.
Research Institute Oslo.
That's pretty cool. Would you consider a career in that? Well, elsewhere in Europe?
Perhaps, but I feel like academia is not really my thing. I think I would like more to actually like engage in actual diplomacy
Policy
instead of
making.
just writing about
Actually,
it.
do something.
A
Yeah.
lot about
Yeah.
research and sort of policy advising and that kind of impact it has. I mean, it seems with IR students, at least with ones in the UK, I mean, your answer is unique, original to say the Norwegian Foreign Office, but half of international relations students in the UK, the few that there are, they just say the Foreign Office, and it bores the hell out of me every time I hear that.
Of course
there's
it does.
so many places,
Yeah,
you could go.
there are a lot of career paths.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, I think the civil service has seen particular recruitment issues in the UK, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing that many of them do want to go into it.
I suppose that's actually a good point. Yeah, but Norway, the Norwegian foreign ministry, that's very interesting. Yeah.
You ever considered chief of staff to Jonas Gahr Støre?
Or Norwegian foreign minister yourself. Yeah.
I would like to be foreign minister, but then it would have to be
What
involved in
party
the
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the issue. You'd have to be involved in a political party, and
Do you prefer just not politicizing things and remaining impartial?
I think that's better, especially regarding foreign policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us today, Alex. Good luck with your dissertation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks
we-
to all our.
We'll see you in 3 weeks' time. I believe as we're
Probably.
taking an Easter break.
Yes. We'll
We'll have
post on the
frequent-
Instagram.
We'll have frequent polls and many fun activities to engage with on the
Yes.
Instagram in the next few coming weeks.
Constant
Yeah.
stories.
course.
So yeah, follow at External Affairs on Instagram, and I think we're going to begin posting old
On our YouTube
episodes.
channel,
Some of our
yes.
old episodes on YouTube.
Yeah.
Some of them we weren't able to.
Including the
record.
interview with James. Yeah.
Yeah.
Canadian
So,
foreign policy.
um, Yeah, but we'll post those, and thank you very much
Brilliant.
for
Thanks very
listening.
much.
And we'll see you next time.